Welcome, everybody, to my broadcast. This is Steve Brodner doing, very honored today to be doing an hour, I hope, or whatever's necessary to cover the material with Steven Heller. Steven Heller is a master of many things. I knew him first as art director of the New York Times Book Review, which he was for about 30 years. Correct me if I get any of this wrong, Steve. And then later we became colleagues at SVA, where we both were teaching. He in the master's program and me in the BFA. And just became kept going for 45 years now, more. 40. It was 77. I did my first gig for you, Steve. So whatever that is, 40.
A lucky number for me, 7-7.
77. Uh, that was 48 years ago. And I think you had hair.
I had hair. I did have hair.
You did have hair, but I don't think I did. I was really working on this.
Still have it on my eyebrows.
That's it. As Alan King says, I have it here, I have it here. Anyway, life is not fair. Uh, I'm going to read this biography that is like the Torah. I'm going to need to, unscroll it and have a 13-year-old come and point to the places where I have to read. I'm going to read it really fast, but I, I know that not everybody knows even the most famous graphic designers, graphic artists, graphic writers, and illustrators because we are not famous. We feel famous, we're not famous.
So it's the St. James version of the Torah.
Yes, with any luck. In 1968, Steven Heller became art director of the New York Free Press, where he met Brad Holland, who we're going to discuss today, who convinced him that page layouts and type choices mattered. Heller had previously not thought about this. After the Free Press, he moved on to various publications, including Screw. And if you don't know what Screw is, look it up. In 1974, he became the youngest art director of the New York Times op-ed, replacing J.C. Suarez. Both you, Brad, and Seymour all connect through JC in different ways. His interests in illustration employed on the op-ed page led him to publish collections on the subject, being art director of the Times Book Review in 77. So really, not that long before I met you. In the 80s, he became interested in design through friendships with Seymour Chwast and the wonderful, brilliant, talented, and beautiful, delightful Louise Feely, who he later married, as well as becoming editor of the AIGA Journal of Graphic Design. Under his lead, the journal became a place of scrutinized design writing. As an educator in the 60s, after leaving SVA, he was hired to teach a newspaper design class. In 84, he helped create master's program at SVA. In 98, he and Lita Tallarico, Tallarico
Yep.
co-founded the MFA design program, a big, big thing and important, and has changed culture, in my opinion, not just my opinion. The school's first graduate program in design. In '08, he co-founded the MFA in Design Criticism with Alice Twemlow. The program was intended to help non-designers find a place in the design field. And in '96, he was inducted into, here are the awards, inducted the Art Directors Club Hall of Fame. '99, received the AIGA Medal for what Paul Asher describes as lifetime achievement that comes from a workday existing roughly between 4:30 a.m. and 8:45. And I can attest to talking to Steve in the office at the New York Times at 7:30 in the morning. And that was his magical technique for getting so much done in addition to being editor and art director at the Times. Society of Illustrators honored him with the Gangle Art Director Award in '05. In 2017, AIG named an award for him, the Stephen Heller Prize, for cultural commentary. Um, and he also received the Design Mind Award, National Design Museum. He is author and co-author of many books. I think, what's the number? 130 books?
200.
Huh? 200? 200 books, ladies and gentlemen. I have to talk fast because in this time he may actually have missed putting out three additional books. Um, Illustration, typography, many subjects related to graphic design. He's published more than 80 titles, written articles for magazines, including, we'll forego all the different magazines that he's written illustrations for, written about illustration design for. For 33 years, he was senior art director of UNLC. Is that
No,
no longer UNLC?
I was just a contributing writer to UNLC.
Okay, so this is wrong. But so far I've been right, and that's
More
it.
or
That's
less.
I'm giving up. That's all.
That's all you need.
Good night, folks. That's all we have time for. Um,
Now on with the show.
on with the show. Uh, I want to add to this that Steve was famous for a number of things. Not just appreciating art, but also being one of the unique art directors open to all of us. Everybody could see him. There was no such thing as see my assistant or drop your portfolio off or I don't have time. Steve had the time. He looked at people. He was brutally honest with us. He never minced words. He was uh, a bit of a tough general, but he saw everybody. And this was remarkable. And as a result, and he understood then, and understands, we all understand now, that this was the way to create a portal for young artists to come through the New York Times and broaden the stylistic and content variety of art that would come in. Something we don't have today, I don't think, in the newspaper. But it's a different era. Under Suarez and Heller, the New York Times became a place where artists were given the opportunity and the responsibility to actually make commentary and say things that were significant and pertinent to the affairs of the day. So you could have the two people we're going to highlight today and talk about. Um, how am I doing?
You're doing fine.
To quote Ed Koch, how am I doing? All right.
JC was the originator, but the birth mother was Lou Silverstein, who created the idea that there should be illustration on the op-ed page rather than political cartoons. There was a distinction between graphic commentary and political cartoons.
But the Times never really had cartoons, did they?
Going back to the turn of the century, there was a cartoon.
Yeah.
I
But
think Teddy
but
Bears.
but what was there before Silverstein? When Silverstein arrived, what did the it was just the Gray Lady, right? There wasn't
Yeah,
much.
it was an editorial page. That was it.
Hmm.
It was during his tenure that the op-ed page was invented by uh, John Oakes and Harrison Salisbury.
Well, um, it made a big impact on culture and an impact on politics, certainly. And you and JC made a huge impact on the world of art. So soon, all these illustrations were filling the Society of Illustrators annuals and all the other design annuals, and people had to pay attention and imitated this in newspapers around the country and magazines. And so Brad and Marshall and Sue Coe, Marshall Arison, Sue Coe, and the all those
Roland Topor,
Weisbecker and,
Philippe Weisbecker, Mel Furukawa,
and
hundreds.
when I first worked for you, there was this vast room. I think it was the ninth floor of the old building, where all the art directors sat at desks, no computers, nothing. wooden desks and a telephone, and that's all there was. And they were just artists who hung around there all day, like Tom Bloom and Misha. What was his name? Misha. Uh, oh, he's no longer with us, but he did wonderful. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name. But he did wonderful.
Misha Richter.
No, he was one of the most published guys in the paper.
Oh, Eugene Mihesko.
Nikolai Ashew, that was
Nikolai
that
Askew.
was his name. Nikolai Ashew and Eugene Milhaskell, who I would see there all the time, and he was the best dressed illustrator. And I think he was interested in meeting young women.
He was, and he later moved back to Romania and became a right-wing politician.
No, really?
Yeah,
Uh,
fascist, actually.
um, sometimes the food is better on the other side.
Sometimes.
To quote Chico Marx. Anyway, I I just remember that time, and then suddenly everybody got a cubby hole, and all that great conviviality ended. But I got to meet I met hundreds of well, dozens of illustrators this way, and Victor Juhas I met up there. We were both, babies.
I think I published Victor for the first time.
Hmm. An amazing talent.
But everything that was done on the op-ed page was actually a replication of things that were done before and just
What
grew
sense do you mean?
in the sense that when J.C. Suarez took over the page from Lou Silverstein, who brought in Ralph Steadman, uh, Robert Osborne, who was a great cartoonist.
Fantastic.
Um, Lou gave the baton to JC, who had great interest in Dada and Surrealism. And so the drawings that he assigned to people and the art direction that he gave to them, and the drawings that he did himself, because he was also an illustrator,
Yes, I remember his work.
caricaturist, were influenced by that art of the 20s and 30s. And that's how I became interested in Dada, Surrealism, the new objectivity, a lot of that European work. Andre Francois, Ronald
Mhm.
Searle, who also appeared on the page.
Right.
So some of the influencers were actually practitioners at the time.
I felt that Suarez and some of the others were kind of coming from Steinberg.
Steinberg was definitely a major influence. And the one time I called Steinberg to ask him to do a piece for the op-ed page, he said, "Why don't you get Eugene Mihesko?"
Ooh,
And I didn't know what he was talking about. I was very young when I took over, and I was only familiar with Steinberg's work from the New Yorker covers. And I wasn't really that familiar yet with what Mihesko was doing. So when I first got there to my desk, which looked a little bit like your desk behind you, I
he's
called up
that
all
old.
I
Yeah.
called up all my heroes. So I called up R. Crumb. I called up Art Spiegelman, who I knew very well. Uh, I called Brad, who was already a fixture on the page. Um, R.O. Bleckman. These were all heroes to me through other venues, through
Mm.
Mad Magazine or Help Magazine or Humbug, uh, television commercials, or the Times itself, because the Times was running illustration regularly 2 or 3 years before I got there.
Bleckman, I think, is still active,
Bleckman is will be 94, and I think he is still active.
and so is Stedman, and Seymour, I believe, is still
Seymour will be 94, and we're working
94.
on his book called The Works.
Fantastic. So that leads us into looking at and talking about these artists. And so I don't, I have to be honest with everyone. I checked out some of these images with Steve first, but I don't think I necessarily have the right order. So forgive me, especially when it comes to, I have a stronger sense of what comes first and second with Brad, but with Seymour, I do not because he's just so, he speaks in so many different languages that I don't know where one moment begins and the other one ends. And so maybe you can help me with that. Anyway, I'm gonna share this baby. Let me call it up just a second. Okay, here it is. Bear with me. Okay, this is not the beginning. This is the beginning. Um, let's see, slideshow. Okay. This is for anyone who doesn't know this book. Know the book. This is Steve's uh, autobiography, his memoir. Came out uh, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
22.
22. Um, this is what he looked like when I first met him. The short hair was shorter, but that's Steven Heller from the 70s. And uh, the book discusses how you come upon um, these important decisions that you're making in mass media from very unlikely places, and and then the very typically 60s and 70s uh, cultural beginnings of any artist coming out of counterculture, coming through these uh, weeklies and not necessarily about politics, more about culture and sex. And but you do talk about Brad Holland a lot. You talk about Brad being a huge influence on you. And this is you from just a few weeks ago. Stephen gave the brilliant commencement address at SVA, and I was there, and I was thrilled because you you know you're always happy when you go to a movie or you hear music where you say, you know, if I could compose music, I would do that. You were hitting all my points. You brought in Gloria Steinem and Jules Pfeiffer, and you just use the term admiring Pfeiffer for uh, busting social taboos. And I love this, using the power of wit to outwit the powerful. Steve Jobs seeking out design knowledge, which a person like that perhaps today would be unlikely to do.
It was before the oligarchs.
That's right. Um, uh, uh, but that's an old tradition of people pursuing things that are not only for profit, but for a genuine love of learning. Eleanor Roosevelt on courage. I have another quote aside from the one that you have for Eleanor, which I'll tell you about another time, but she's a hero of mine as well. And you sent everybody off with an understanding that it's your job to not try, but to actually do. A little like Yoda. There is no try, there is only make, there is only do. Now we get to Brad. I'm going to read just a short, really fast biography of Brad for my students, in particular, who may not know who he is and was. He just passed. And we thought he'd always be with us, so certainly outlive the rest of us. Um, and I love this picture because the photograph looks like one of his images. Um, his portraits, his imaginings are all of, no matter who he's drawing or painting, he manages to make it monumental. And so here's the sculptural built from the ground up quality in this photo. And it looks like could have been taken in the 19th century of Rodin or somebody. Uh, his first editorial work was in Avant-Garde magazine in 68 under the direction of Herb Lubalin, who taught at Cooper when I was there. Two significant milestones in Holland's early career were becoming a regular contributor to Playboy in 67 and then in 1970 at the Times. In 69, Holland and Steven Heller founded the short-lived Asylum Press. Correct me if any of this is wrong, because it's off the computer. Created to represent and promote the work of artists and designers of underground and alternative press resources. After the failure of New York Review of Sex, Heller became art director of Screw, the sex review, for which Holland did some covers. Holland's drawings in particular. And so those of us who know and love Brad probably don't know those early pieces that you and he were working together on. His Watergate scandal pictures became a single body work published in the first book of op-ed art, The Art of the Times, which I have somewhere here, edited by J.C. Suarez, and it could stand a reprint with better quality images. It was edited by J.C., published in 73 by Darien House. Same year, Holland would accompany Suarez when the art director arranged an exhibition of op art at the Musée des Arts, des Arts
They are et
Décoratifs in Paris. In 86, the artist was so firmly established as a prominent presence in its graphic community, the Washington Post said Holland was the undisputed star of American illustration. Writing for print magazine, Mr. Heller wrote, as Pollock redefined plastic art, Holland has radically changed the perception of illustration. Maybe the most important American illustrator in history. Certainly to all of us at that time. I remember one time I came in with a sketch for a piece I was doing for you, and you had problems with it. And I said, well, maybe it needs to be more like, like in this way, like Brad Holland. And you said, no, no, no. You make it like you. I didn't know what that was exactly at the time, but that's how
Well,
big you
you
were.
were Thomas Nast at the time.
I was Thomas, but Brad was also influenced by Nast, I think.
Brad was influenced by Goya, um, by uh, Paul Clay, not Paul Clay, Heinrich Clay.
Heinrich Clay, yeah,
Uh, he was influenced by a lot of things. He was influenced by Rembrandt,
yes,
uh,
but
and
also he was
influenced by Crumb.
he was inventing a new way of hatching with pen and ink, which I don't think anybody ever did. And that was one of his many breakthroughs. Anyway, do you know where this comes from?
Yeah, that was the rock and roll uh, oldies show that I helped produce and was the art director for. That was produced by Rock Magazine, where I was the art director.
Was this a program or a poster?
It was a program,
Okay.
and
Can you
the
remember who the artists are in this?
yeah, the guy with the big lips is Brad Holland.
Okay.
The guy with the big nose is Ray Schultz, who was a writer for uh, Free Press, East Village Others, Screw.
Uh-huh.
The bald guy with his tongue out was Wendell Miner, who
Oh,
is a very well-known
he's
artist,
still and still
illustrator.
around, still working.
And the guy with the glasses and the sideburns was me.
Uh-huh.
And Brad, at that point, was working in this cartoon style that owed a little bit to psychedelics, owed a little bit more to R. Crumb,
Crumb, yeah.
and owed a little bit to Basil Wolverton,
Okay.
who was a Mad Magazine
Mad Magazine
illustrator.
and famous for that one color cover and oh, I can't remember what the name of that.
It was Life Magazine,
Yes, okay.
except it was Mad. It was a takeoff on Life Magazine.
Right. kind of a Mona Lisa design. And this one, can you help me with this one?
This one is Brad's neighborhood on the Lower East Side.
Okay.
When I first met Brad, it was through an ad in the Village Voice where I was trying to get illustrators to work on a magazine that I was going to publish called Borrowed Time. And that's where I learned to be an art director and a designer and
Hmm.
to appreciate type. Brad had all those skills because he worked at a studio in Chicago. He was in charge of a division at Hallmark Cards, uh, where he met Wendell Miner, and they all both
Wow.
worked there together. Uh, when he moved to New York, he had to live in a hotel, and finally got an apartment that you could only say was a uh, a transom between drug addicts. He didn't even bother to lock the door because
Oh
he
God.
would come through to get to the staircase,
Gee.
the fire escape.
With us on the Lower East Side?
This was on 10th Street between C and D.
Yeah, know it very well.
And I would visit him down there thinking that nobody would hurt me because I affected a limp.
Did
And
did it
Brad,
work?
it worked until Brad told me that his friends, the drug addicts, were going to beat me up because they kept seeing this long haired hippie walking down Avenue B or Avenue C. And I stopped that route. I went another way. But I did meet some of these characters. He put them all in caskets. There's Richard Nixon in the right, on the far right.
Is
That's
that a self-portrait above Nixon?
Brad above Nixon.
Yeah.
You can see a guy on the left stealing Brad's television.
Yeah.
Uh, they all existed, all of these people,
Uh-huh.
one point or another. And he worked in this style quite a bit. Uh, it was darker than Crumb because that's what Brad's sensibility was. But it was kind of this interregnum. It was this transition period between doing his Playboy work.
Yeah.
It's very detailed and very chiaroscuro with
Hmm.
color added to his New York Times style, which evolved from this particular image into a very famous one of a junkie filling his arms
Yes.
with a spoon. And the
You didn't
arms,
see in the Times work this kind of silhouetted concept of imagery against a white background.
no,
He always filled his backgrounds with stormy clouds or other forms of energy, textural energy.
yeah, they were mostly
Yeah.
text, textural.
Yeah.
One other quick note on this: the Society of Illustrators mounted an anti-war show that was curated by Lou Myers and Alan Kober.
Hmm.
Brad was invited to be on that show, in that show, with a painting, but he felt that the show was not really representative of the anti-war movement or of the urban grit of what was going on at the time. So we, and meaning Brad, I, and a couple of underground cartoonist friends, went to the society, got into the show, and Brad tacked this up next to his painting. And Alan Kober had a fit and ripped it off the wall, and we were thrown out of the show.
I curated a show at the Society of Illustrators at the SVA Gallery, an anti-war show. Well, you were instrumental in my doing that, I think. Uh, in any case, I asked Brad, Milton provided an image, but I asked Brad to be in the show, and he says, "I'm not against this war. This was the this was the Iraq War."
Yeah, Brad had,
At that time, he had become more right wing.
well, I wouldn't call it that. And I have called it that, but I wouldn't call it that anymore. What Brad was a maverick, and he didn't follow the party line. He wasn't an ideologue, he was a philosopher. And his philosophy was from the middle of the country. He was born in Fremont, Ohio. Uh, he had values that were his own. There's a kind of Dylan-esque quality to Brad Holland. You're never quite sure. Dylan, turned to born again Christianity for 3 years
Right.
and still maintains some of that spirituality in his work. Brad turned, pivoted when he felt something went against his values. And not all of us agreed with him at the time. And I personally just stopped talking politics to him.
I think that's a good solution. I have friends who I realize you can't go there. Um, and and I did have something like that conversation with Brad anyway. I said, I don't agree with you, but um, I love to talk about art with you, and I admire your work tremendously, and that's the big story. That's the important thing.
And the one
I
thing
think he
about
was
Brad,
like Christopher Hitchens in a way,
he was like Christopher Hitchens in a
where
way.
where he felt that Islamic fundamentalism and the rise of theocracy, which we're seeing in the country now, um, is was a bigger issue. And he may have been right, and I may have been wrong, but I don't think that war, I don't think anybody looking back, if Hitchens were alive today, I don't think he would maintain the position he had about the Iraq War.
Well, I know that Brad was not a Trumpist. That we did talk about. But he was an independent.
And he
And
probably understood people that from his hometown who would vote for Trump and the reasons why.
he understood, and he would make commentaries that were in our favor or not as
Yeah,
it affected him.
right.
And you can't hold somebody's art in the same light as their politics. This was the piece I was talking about.
Yes, this is a very famous piece and imitated by many people, including me. Um, when,
And it was done in a couple of versions. Uh,
yeah,
One version was published in a magazine that, or an underground newspaper we both worked for, and he did some covers for, called the New York Ace. And that work was done simultaneous with him becoming a regular on the op-ed page, uh, owing to Suarez.
hmm I just want to point out that what's powerful about this is not only the idea. The idea is plenty powerful, but I think what we have here that entrances us and moves us is the delicacy of the elements, that tongue, the way that tongue reaches out for the substance on the spoon. There is tremendous sensitivity there. The
What's on the
sensitivity,
spoon?
huh?
What's on the spoon?
And what's on the spoon?
The
Exactly.
spoon is amorphic, but it's a focal point.
It's it's um, it's given delicacy. Also, the belt is very delicate. It has a great feeling for the texture of the leather and that little metal. Oh, I don't know what you call it. The metal uh, 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 small staff that goes through the punched holes in the. I'm not using terms of art here, but you know what I mean. The way that is handled, it's sexual almost, and it's like a living. creature. In fact, everything here is a living creature. The finger, the the belt, the hair, it's all moving, it's all undulating. He has this, and I'm going to mention this again as we go. It's a quality of things having tremendous solidity and weight, but also fluidity at the same time. At the same time, always. This is a shitty print of a very beautiful drawing. I apologize for that. Um,
The Sun is the second of the series,
mhm.
but I think it was used for something else.
My students sometimes will leave parts of illustrations uncared about. And it's a big issue with me to say you must care about every corner of your illustration with the exact same amount of attention and care. And this is a perfect example of that. Every face there is just as important. There isn't like, three or four important ones, and then the rest are blocked in. No.
He didn't clone them.
And he didn't clone them. It looks like it's the same guy crying, but it's um, with great variation and subtle variation.
One thing needs to be said about his op-ed work. Most of it, if not all of it, was done separate from an article. The way we worked was he did pages upon pages of ideas. This is true with Christoph Niemann as well. He'd bring those ideas in, and JC, when he was there, or I, or one of the editors, would pick a few that he would go to finish on. And then we'd get them engraved, because in those days it was hot metal.
I remember.
And we'd post it on a bulletin board which was our bank. And if an article came up, the first thing anybody would do is look at that bulletin board and pair the illustration with the article. And I didn't do that myself all the time. Sometimes it was the deputy editor, David Schneiderman, who later became publisher of the Village
Voice, yeah.
who passed away this past year. He would say, I've got the perfect article for this perfect drawing. Brad felt that that was the best way of working, but at the same time, he resented that the headline writer always wrote the headline to explain the illustration. Brad felt that the illustration should be perceived on its own.
Right. Although it's my experience that people, even if they have the capacity to do that, are insecure and need the little label, like in a gallery. Even if the painting is by Mark Rothko and it's called Black Number 29, they need to see that and they say, "Oh, Black
It's like putting
29." Yeah.
it's like putting an egg in Pillsbury cake batter.
Yes, it's over-egged. Uh, Here is one of his famous Watergate pieces, and just beautifully conceived and great poetry. And again, we have these characters made of stone, but yet they float. Uh,
And to show this today in 2025, when it was done in 1970, you don't you I challenge anybody to have the same feeling about it that those of us who saw it when it was first published. It was like listening to the Beatles for the first time, or listening to Sergeant Pepper for the first time. Uh,
or for
like
me, or for me, uh, Edward R. Murrow. It was in the New York Times, and it's hard for people to understand the importance of that page. That was a page where you read James Reston and Tom Wicker. and Russell Baker. These Nobody has any idea of how loud that megaphone was, how important that was.
It was a huge megaphone. When you look at the opinion pages today, they don't have the same resonance.
Can you imagine Paul Krugman decides to ditch it to go to Substack? You know, can you imagine, can you imagine Tom Wicker doing anything like that? You wouldn't leave it because you had the most profound impact in the world. And but they must have been leaning on him at the times for him to do that. Uh, but uh, I'm still a subscriber to the New York Times, and I love Nicholas Kristof and a bunch of them. But it isn't the same thing. You didn't feel the earth moving. It's not a good
Nothing stays
metaphor.
the same, and younger people are going to have different reactions
Yeah.
and will embrace what they embrace. Uh, and you have to ultimately, as an artist, I think you have to be a connoisseur, and before you can become a connoisseur, you have to practice. uh, you you practice to be a virtuoso, but you also practice to be able to read things, practice to have connoisseurship.
You have to be a human being. You can't just be this wrist that pumps out imagery. You have to also be guided by a certain uh, internal compass. Uh, Brad had that. That's that was one of the big things he had. Another big thing he has, and you see this in everything he shows you, um, is this tremendous understanding of sculptural qualities achieved through light. He's doing, uh, he's achieving his monumentality through this, and there is no form that is lit in a casual way. It's almost as though he's arranging the lighting in his mental studio to give you this effect where the light is above the head, looking down quite often, creating uh, hollows, tones in the hollows between the eye and the bridge of the nose, underneath the eye, cheekbones. Most lighting situations, if you look at me right now on this Zoom call, um, it's very diffused in the studio. I have a bunch of lights not pointed at me. Uh, but for Brad, that would be unacceptable. There has to
Brad would
be,
often work from Polaroids,
is that right?
yeah, to
So
get the light.
was the light invented, or did he arrange for the Polaroids to have this kind of lighting?
He arranged for the Polaroids to have either the form or the light,
Mm-hmm.
but they weren't copies of what he was doing. It was just there for structural.
Yeah, yeah. But he's not making up the way faces work in the world. This is reporting on that. And what a devilishly difficult thing to do this with tusks. To have these two people in this kind of an embrace where you have tusks involved. It had to take you an hour and a half to just pose them that way. Uh,
Well,
making,
it had to take you a lifetime to think of that.
yes, I know. Uh, it's remarkable. This is one of his more famous ones that I remember.
That
Uh,
was the Week in Review,
we can review. Yeah.
front page.
This happens to be a good print. This is sort of what it would have looked like when it ran. And I guess it's the story of capitalism and the oppression that the wealthy wreaks upon the less fortunate.
Well,
Uh,
that's the other great thing about Brad. You can interpret his work. He had a reason for doing something. But going back to what I said about the bank of illustrations, His work was multi-interpretational, and he would ultimately be happy or upset depending on how it was interpreted. But that's the way he made these things to be interpreted.
Well, maybe that is the key to its enduring fascination. Look at these legs. He has this, even if a character wasn't being built up from the ground up, those legs are all, massive sculptural things. There's a kind of a Rodin quality to his work. This one also very famous and a favorite of mine from way back. I think this was New York Times. And the use of white, you know, the idea of the fluid coming down, the milk, I suppose. Uh, if you
Well, it
don't
was
have,
trickle down theory. It
say again,
was the trickle down
trickle
theory.
down theory, of course. Um, if you don't have a lot of white in your picture, then when you do have the white, white becomes a brilliant color. And this is a thing for illustrators to remember because we take white for granted. It's the color of the paper we're starting with. Uh, but if you understand the power of white, then you can see how this thing here really moves and has tremendous power. Okay, this is a shitty print, but I put it in. I know you don't like this image, but I just want to briefly ask you about this. Is this the book, the famous book in the New York Times? Can you talk about that for a minute?
Uh, it's not the famous book.
It is not.
No,
Okay.
there were a few loose leaf books where he put his sketches, but that was not one of them.
And the idea behind this was that he was just going to do image after image and park it there and
Yeah.
say, you want something, let me just call me and
They
you
were they were roughs. I mean, it was like going into a Warby Parker,
yeah,
picking out your frames, your glasses frames, and they would then put the lenses in. And
I see. So these were not finished pieces. I always thought they were. I thought somehow he found it within himself to be able to do hundreds of finishes, put them in a book and
he
say,
did dozens of finishes, but he didn't do hundreds.
okay. My understanding was that up until recently, they were still using that book.
That I can't tell you.
That you don't know. Okay. Anyway, uh, moving on to color, uh, some of his uses of color are just simply type design and the color of type that would go with the drawing. And then, of course, he was a very fine painter. And while he was working at the Times, he was painting for Playboy. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah. Um, this is not a very good reproduction of Death of a Salesman poster.
That one I've never seen.
You've never seen this?
Uh,
Okay, well, I wish I could show it to you with better resolution, but it's still quite impressive.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And uh, again, monumental, the hole in the shoe, and the way the light flashes off the man's head, just in front and in back of the ear, and the white of the shirt at the cuff. Brilliant success.
And
Uh,
he's not looking at you.
and he's
You-
not, no, he's
What
living
you're
in,
seeing is his torment.
yes, and shame. It conveys the play perfectly. Here's another way he used color, pen and ink, where the colors are just laid. I imagine at this point he's using Photoshop. Um, Textures combined with colors that are not very different in value. He's matching the values, the tones in the face, the tones in the garment, the tones in the hand are all kind of 40 to 50% everything. So the lines are kept sacrosanct. There's no wild color to distract you. And then the shirt is 100% white, and then the hat of the tooth is, I love this. It's ivory. It's sort of an off-white, maybe a 10% green yellow thing. Uh, a lot of thinking is going on. Um, and I really do, I have to confess, I love these color resolutions than his paintings, more, a little more than the paintings. And I guess you know the story of this one, right?
Yeah.
He
The-
was, when Patrick Flynn went to the Progressive, he brought with him a lot of us who he knew in New York. And he was art director of the Progressive for about maybe close to 20 years. And Brad was, of course, as big a star there as he was at Times. And Irwin Noel had just died. Irwin was a worldly, well-traveled, well-read autodidact uh, and Holocaust survivor who I was privileged to meet in the 80s once. And then he suddenly died of a heart attack, a young, relatively young man. And Matthew Rothschild became the art director. Matthew's an intelligent fellow, but didn't have the background that Irwin had. So when Patrick brought this picture in as a cover of a story on Pinochet, um, Matthew laid down the gauntlet. They had had conflicts up till then and told Patrick uh, that you cannot run it. And Patrick said, we're running it and you can fire me. Or you can run it and I quit. I think that's what it was. So he did get this in, and then he left the Progressive, which is a tragedy all round. Uh, but um, this is an undeniably powerful image. Classic Brad Holland. And I guess if you're going to go to the mat on anything, you might as well go to the mat on this one. No pun intended. You have anything to say about this one?
Well, I always thought it was very powerful, but I never liked the way the mouth was drawn.
Mm-hmm.
He had done thematically people as teeth one or two other pictures. Um, he did it, as you say, for the cover, so there's enough space up top for the logo and headlines. So it was done as a functional piece, but uh, and it looked good on the cover, but it was never one of my favorite drawings.
Mm-hmm. The mouth is not drawn from life. It's reminds me of the head on the steeplechase building. Uh,
Yeah,
till you, right?
till you.
But maybe that's what Brad. And here's Brad expressing his opinion about Islamic jihad. I don't know who this was for. It's very powerful and very scary. Um, he's using oil, not acrylic, right? Do you know?
No, actually, I
Okay.
think he was using acrylic for many of the works, but later on, I don't know what he did.
It looks like it may be on paper because I'm not seeing right now an effective canvas. I'm just talking through my hat, and I'm not even wearing my hat. Here is another
I don't
example
think he did the paintings on paper. He would do them on board
on
occasionally,
board. Okay.
but he was sketching.
This has a feeling of board or paper. This could be canvas. Uh, Malcolm X. Um, again, monumental heads, extremely powerful heads.
They
And
weren't caricatures, they were portraits.
yes,
And they didn't necessarily always look like the people as you'd expect them to look. This was not taken verbatim from a photograph.
right. He's giving you enough of Malcolm X to know who it is, but he's also adding, the Brad Holland monumentality. It's another kind of Easter Island head. Um, he's working out this feeling he has about forms and images. Look at the woman here in this one. This is done with a lighter hand, but and I'm sure this is for Playboy. But look at how built she is from the ground up. Again, there's
I
tremendous
really,
power in every image. Here we go back to the Watergate series.
this one was a brilliant.
Yes,
When he brought this in, everybody gasped.
I'll bet. Easter Island heads, and they're either toppling over or they're dancing. But it's not a caricature. This really is kind of a portrait of Nixon. I don't remember this, again, a very poor reproduction, but I chose the ones I love most. And I kind of ate the quality. Look at the character that's tumbling on the left. Again, very solid, but also light as air. Could just one tap of that cue stick and it could go floating off into space. How he does this. And also the light coming from above once again, not on the little guy, but on the big guy. And that hand is fantastic. Do you remember what this one was for?
I don't. I don't remember whether it was for me or not.
All right. You have a lot of hundreds and thousands of pictures to remember, so you're not expected to. And this is, again, another case of a pen and ink drawing. Maybe there's some pencil lines in here. And then he's, again, playing with this idea of mid-range values, different colors, but mid-range values, all kind of equal, except for the red. But the background, the flesh tones, and the pants and the chair are kind of even in terms of value. It's a game he's playing to see if he can still leave the lines powerful and not have the colors blow them away. And to me, this is a big problem with color and a big problem students have because they want to slather, you know this, they want to slather everything with black and red and God knows what else. And I'm always saying to them, look at all the drawing we're missing. I tell them black is not always black. Like this shirt is black. This light is black. There are different kinds of blacks. You can decide to have an 80% black, and still we can see the lines. We can see the drawings that you've got. And to me, that has tremendous value. I don't know who he did this for. Do you?
No.
Oops. Okay, now we get to Seymour. Something about Seymour really fast. Worked at Esquire, where he was reunited with Ed Sorel. After both of them were fired in 1954, they founded Pushpin without Milton. Milton came later than Reynold Ruffins. They put out the Pushpin graphic bi-monthly in 57. Chwast is famous for his commercial artwork, which includes posters, food packaging, magazine covers, publicity art, often referred to as the left-handed designer. Chwast's unique graphic design melded social commentary with a distinctive style of illustration, which refers to as his Roxy style. I'm not sure if I understand what Roxy is.
Roxy is Art Deco.
As in the Roxy Theater and the Roxy Ushers.
Yep.
Today, he continues to work and is a principal at Pushpin Group in New York, which I'm happy is still around. In 1970, he met Paul Asher during an interview she had with him at Pushpin while she was still senior at Tyler High School. They were married in 73 and divorced 5 years later and remarried in 89. Way to go, Seymour. Chwast has two daughters from a previous relationship. In 85, he received AIG medal, is the font designer of Chwast Buffalo Fafucha Loose Caboose, NF, and Weedy Beasties, NF. He's a member of the Alliance Graphique International. He was awarded in 2023 the National Design Award as a design visionary by the Smithsonian Design Museum in recognition of his work. I'm sure there have been many, many exhibitions in many, many places. Uh, he's a he's a movement unto himself. But unlike Brad, as we'll see, he has many different styles and approaches and ideas, design ideas that run through him. Just a different kind of an artist. These guys are impossibly young. This picture, it's Seymour and Milton. Must have been, does it say 68, 69, something like that? And their
And you
poster
can
work.
see Milton Glazer's famous Dylan poster.
Right. And then there's Seymour's piece next to that on the left, which
Yeah, that piece that Seymour did on the left appeared in Mad Men.
is that right?
And it was on the wall of the agency head at Sterling Advertising.
Well, he and Ed are remaining madmen. I asked Ed once, how did you keep losing jobs and immediately getting the next job? He said, look, he says, it was the 1950s. If you were white and a man in 1950s, you didn't have any problems.
Yeah.
If you couldn't get another job, there's something wrong with you. Anyway, um, things are better now, I think. I'm just going to run through a bunch of different things. I don't know where they fit in the order of things. They're just wonderful images, which I love.
Well,
I'd like you to jump in and help in any way you can with these. Yeah?
Seymour was influenced by the comics as well as other classic arts. He was influenced by posters, French posters of the Art Nouveau and Art Deco periods, German posters of the Jugendstil period, uh, people like Lucien Bernhard, uh, Ludwig Holbein, the Austrian poster group, the Berlin Plakat. Uh, so a lot of the work that you see has reference to the past. Uh, it wasn't called retro in those days, and it isn't retro in the way it's defined as far as I define it now, which is just taking from the past and reproducing it. He interpreted the past.
Right.
As you said, he had lots of languages, and those languages would appear sometimes uh, by themselves or together with two other languages in the same image.
Right. And it would be his genius to make it work. And and just look at the type here, the type design. Um, it is studying very carefully Art Nouveau posters and the way those looked. And it's deft. It's extremely competent and observant and a joy. And I think the text here is even more interesting than the image.
Well, it's the whole thing come together.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Again, here's another language he speaks.
And
Uh,
this was more recent. This was a few years ago for an exhibition that he did. Uh, and as Seymour has gotten older, his line has gotten a little shakier, a little simpler, but his mind continues to compose in uh, ways that are incredibly original. You know, he starts at one side of the paper, left, upper left, and works his way down. And everything just fits together so nicely here. How many sketches he did to get to this point, I don't know. But usually he doesn't have to do much.
Well, he has a lifetime of sketching. You know, you get to the place where you don't have to do something again. It sort of falls into place. Unless you're really challenging yourself, in which case it's okay to run through a bunch of new sketches until you're happy. Um, but what he's doing here is something I point out to my students in the very first class of every year at SVA, which is that illustration without design is nothing. If you can understand that, then you can communicate well. But if you think that it's all about just drawing a beautiful flower, um, you're wrong. Unless you're a fine artist and you just want to do a painting of a beautiful flower, it doesn't matter. But this is a perfect example of how you can have, I'm not going to count all the elements in here, maybe 30, 40 elements, something like that, uh, and how you organize them so that everything is completely clear, nothing is crashing into anything else, and they each have a certain amount of sovereignty and dignity to their own life in the piece. Nothing is really unimportant here. And these are all terribly important. I'm going to save this one and show it to my students. I have other examples of design like this. But I was talking to Walter Bernard about this, and he totally agreed with me that design is the most important part of illustration. You have to be sensitive to it and interested in it. Look at same thing is happening inside his face here. The way the words are very, very uh, cognizant of each other, and they exist peaceably with each other, but only with the strong guiding hand of God, which in this case is Seymour. Um, this was a show of his at this museum.
Plakat Museum in Poland.
Hmm.
And yes, it was a poster for that show.
I love it.
So do I.
Yeah.
And that's
This is
one.
that piece we were talking about that's in Mad Men. Um,
This was an issue of the pushpin graphic.
hmm.
Pushpin graphic was the studio's house organ, but rather than a full-fledged promo for the studio, they created a separate editorial entity that sometimes all the members of the studio contributed to. Sometimes it was just an individual. And Seymour would do one every few issues on his own. And they often find different shapes, sizes, and materials to print on and with. And so this issue of the graphic was turned folded out into a poster.
I think you'll agree with me. It is extremely pushpin. Uh, and also, can you
Extremely
talk?
pushpin is what they defined as pushpin.
Yeah,
There was no intermediary. So it's definitely pushpin because it is pushpin.
yeah. I say when I say pushpin, I'm thinking we care a great deal about the silhouettes. This is what Sorel talks about too, about illustration and his illustration being about the silhouettes. That the each image is defined by its outlines, and to be very cognizant of those things existing, just like in the last piece we saw. Can you talk a little bit about his artistic relationship with Milton? Because in pieces like this, I do see so much interaction, interplay. You know, are they a little bit like uh, Picasso and Braque, or uh, Pizarro and Cezanne, where
More like Laurel and Hardy.
okay. Here's another fine mess you've gotten me in.
Uh, they each had their own approaches. They worked often from the same sources, uh, like the magazine Jugendstil or Jugend, which was the German Jugendstil magazine. They had a whole run of those bound volumes in their library. And they work from different sources. I mean, uh, Milton Glaser was a student of Morandi. He spent time in Italy and soaked in Renaissance work. He was much more of a renderer. Uh, Seymour, as I said earlier, was influenced by the comics. He was not a traveler. He traveled ultimately, but his artistic inspirations came from popular advertising art and popular comic art. And uh, then adding into and onto his imagery was the tools that were available. Like he did a lot of cellotac, which is a film material that peels off of a sheet, and then you can place it on the drawing and cut out the shapes you want.
With an X-Acto knife.
Yeah. So he often would give the cellotac work to somebody else in the studio because it
Yeah.
was very tedious.
Well, you could produce more art this way, but you would select the colors and you would do the drawing.
They'd all be Pantone colors.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, here's a commercial job by him for mm,
It's mobile showcase.
PBS, a broadcast of the play Nicholas Nickleby. So for this, he needed to think about, oh, I don't know, 25, 30 characters from the play. And he needed to get the main character sort of a portrait. Roger Rees, as I recall,
Yeah, it
was
was.
the actor. And
It was a bus poster, a bus shelter poster.
I
So
do remember this.
it was huge. Mobile was very much a patron of the poster arts.
Hmm. Um, the colors in this case, as opposed to the Brads we looked at, are hilariously high value colors. Um, and if you're going to use that kind of a lime green, you better make it a rhythm and use it again and again. And I think that makes it work. Um, but it's to me uh, a risky color. Uh, I don't think there's any other value in this picture that is on that wild 100% level. Uh,
Seymour loved risky colors, still loves risky.
but I think what pulls it together is the black. That if you have black, that much black, then you can get away with stuff like this. And then also there's a red on the lower left that's kind of rich. Um, and there's a red rose in the upper right. Um, and super smart stuff and delicious, you know. But for me, color is a terrible risk, and I always uh, err on the side of muted colors because I want to show the drawing. Uh, he's it's about time we talked about his social commentary. He feels deeply about issues of war and peace and social justice, and so there's been a lot of his work along those lines. I'm not scratching the surface here. We're already way out of time. but I want to finish my slide tray. And if you're generous enough to stick with me, I feel very grateful. This is a fine document we've got going. Um, this is a poster. It says it's an anti-war poster. Um, do you have any sense of where it was produced and who saw it and who used it?
Well, it was based on war posters from the Civil War and World War One as well. He used clip art to create the soldiers in battle, the mother and the son.
Mm-hmm.
War is good business, invest your son. I don't know whether that was Seymour's original uh, phrase, but there was a lot of good language being used in the anti-war movement of the 60s and early 70s.
And this is done with a certain amount of humor. Um, and humor is very good in strong commentary. You look at this and you think, oh, this is looks like a cover of New York Magazine or something. You don't get it right away, and then boom, it hits you.
It's
Even
the kind of
the
thing that
pictures,
called
huh?
poster. There was a poster shop called Poster Masters, or on where the Condé Nast building is today on in Times Square.
Uh-huh.
And I believe that this and some of his other anti-war posters were produced for Poster Masters.
Okay. I put this in because I thought it was cute.
Well, this one, done in the same style as the previous one,
Yes.
was uh, for a liquor company.
Is that right?
An advertisement. Joni is standing in front of the bottle of liquor that it's advertising.
I see. I didn't get that. Uh, but
This
you
was
know,
in a train station. So this was Seymour doing a kind of counterculture idea for a capitalist company.
okay. Because it was popular, it was hip to be counterculture.
Because the counterculture got co-opted by the mainstream.
That's right. The Vandals stole the handles.
Yeah,
And
another poster.
I love this. Uh, this is,
Seymour's impetus for this was advertising and bad breath.
do you think he was looking a little bit at Tommy?
It looks like Tommy Younger, but I don't think it
You don't
was.
think he was? No. And then we go from, from that to this.
And this
Uh,
is a copy of the pushpin graphic during the days before they standardized the format. And this publication, 8 pages or 12 pages, there are all these stories and illustrations about dogs, and they're wonderful, wonderfully funny, wonderfully lighthearted.
who wrote the stories?
Sometimes Seymour would pick up stories from different sources. Sometimes uh, Myrna Davis, who worked at Pushpin, and his Paul Davis's wife would write
Ah,
uh, issues. Sometimes Paula Scher would write copy.
how fun. Um, okay. Poster Man. This was the cover for the book of his uh, posters. Shepherd Ferry. You worked with him on this, and you did the. Did you design it?
No,
Did he?
he did.
Seymour.
He
Seymour
did
designed. Yeah,
all his design.
always. And then there are things like this. You have uh, the most entertaining thing. It's like an animated movie, and then you go from that to an anti-war, a big anti-war book. And I'm going to show a few pieces from this book and then we'll say goodbye because I know I'm over
Did
time.
this all in different media. This one was a woodcutter
Yeah.
linoleum. The previous picture was marker.
Uh-huh.
This, which you can see quite.
It's a wonderful woodcut.
Yeah, Seymour's earliest work, an earliest anti-war book, was called The Book of Battles, and it was done when Pushpin was just starting, uh, and there are very few copies left of it. And it was all done in woodcut with hand-colored pages.
Well, so many skills. And here's what pen and ink
Yeah, this one almost looks like a Brad Holland sketch.
does. And the type is elegantly tucked in the left-hand corner, making room for the hand and the foot. And then here's Napoleon. Uh,
And this was done with Pentel. Uh,
uh-huh. Like a
his
felt.
eyesight is getting is aging, and so uh, he can only work with certain tools.
Well, I couldn't tell that his there's any falling off on the drawing. It's still Seymour. How about this one? This is wonderful.
Yeah, I believe that was just done with Pentel.
You know, you got to find the pens and pencils you like. This is my pencil case, Steve.
It's good
Okay.
piece of
Every
art.
day, every day I feel, I think this one is a fountain pen drawing. This one is a uniball. You should have the options. This looks like a brush painting, but we're talking,
I think it was uh, a Pentel.
yeah. But look how much a character the type is. It.
Well, that's the thing that Pushpin introduced to the world, that was introduced to the world earlier in the 20th century and in the 19th century. And that was the total work of art, the Gesamtkunstwerk in German. Um, it was the image and text brought together in perfect harmony. And that's what Seymour and Milton learned from the past art of
Mhm.
Art Deco. So this is not a stylized piece, but it's integrating text and image.
This is the last piece I have.
Yeah,
Uh,
he did uh, a couple of three, I think, um, graphic novels, and in this one, I believe it's uh, Virgil's trip through hell.
mhm.
Um, he did Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, and he did one other, which I can't remember at this time.
I tell my students there are so many public domain pieces of literature. It's just there waiting for you. You could do Don Quixote, you can do any Mark Twain, you could do Alice in Wonderland. Have fun. Uh, but again, how important a strong design is to your illustration. There isn't anything that's crashing here. There's nothing that's in the way. There's nothing uh, that's unimportant. Every tiny thing is important. Uh, but it has its place and it belongs there. And also, Seymour knows the order in which the eye of the viewer is going to arrive there. And he uses that in order to uh, tell his story, which is, I'm sure you'll agree, the most important thing there is. Tell your story at the same time as delighting. What did Milton say? To inform and delight. right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
He also said art is work.
I love that. Um, and AI is not work, so AI is not art. Anyway, I thank you very much today for your time, Steve.
Well,
Uh,
thanks for this travel log.
yeah, it was a little more exhausting than I thought, or exhaustive. I hope not exhausting. Uh, but it's a good document and very important to have your take on these things because, as uh, Baron Munchausen said, "Was you there, Charlie?" And you was, and I'm very grateful to you. I do feel though that we there's more to talk about, and I would like to do when you're up to it and when there's time to do a talk about your favorite designers because this is something that, um, as I said earlier, students of illustration need to really understand deeply how important they are to us and how the partnership with designers is what makes illustration uh, to a certain extent what it is. And so, I know that you have an awful lot to say about this. People you knew and people you didn't know, people you didn't want to know. I don't know. But you did an interview once with Paul Rand, and
More than once.
more than once. But I saw one. It's available on YouTube, although I wouldn't know where to find it. Maybe you can help me. But he defines art in one sentence, and he says uh, art is when you are able to. Uh, do you remember the quote? Art is when you're able to tell the truth uh, with form meeting uh, the idea. It's something I butchered it, but when form meets the idea and you can tell the truth, that makes art. And and that's to me where I always want to be. That's the place that I want my work to dwell. And those are the artists I admire the most. And we looked at two of them today. So I'm very grateful to you.
Well, I thank you, and we'll do it again.
I'd like that. Okay, Steve, all the best. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Bye for now.